Hey gamers, Blindy here. It's February 2024 and I recently finished playing Persona 4 Golden. Before we get started, I just want to say that I wanted to like this game more than I did. Not to say that this is a bad game, far from it, but it's almost universally loved and I had my expectations pretty high. If you want to hear my thoughts on why I don't think this game is quite a masterpiece, stick around. Before we talk about the gameplay, let's talk a little bit about the game's details. Alright, Persona 4 has a couple versions out there, so don't get confused. The original Persona 4 came out on the PlayStation 2 back in July 10th, 2008 in Japan. Persona 4 Golden was released for the PlayStation Vita back in June 14th, 2012, about 4 years later. And currently we're sitting at over 10 years old for that version, which is the most accessible version. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Golden, compared to Persona 4, is an upgraded version. It has some more content added to it. So if you're looking for more Persona content, there are so many freaking spin-offs out there if you're looking for some more. And all these spin-offs are wildly different genres. So currently they have fighting games, rhythm dance games, and several others. So Persona is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei games. And to be perfectly honest, I don't really know much about Shin Megami Tensei. I know that it's been around since 1987. So if you're following the pedigree of Persona, you could trace it pretty far back. So as far as Shin Megami Tensei, there are a whole bunch of games in the mainline series with various spin-offs, which includes Persona. So Atlus, the developer of Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, is known to me by only one game previously, and that's for Ogre Battle 64, which, from my understanding, they only provided the localization to North America. But that's the way I've recognized the logo. Personally, that was my favorite game for the N64, so I'm going to say they've done a pretty decent job. It has absolutely nothing to do with Persona at all, though, so just a little tidbit of information. Alright, so if you want to get your hands on this game and you don't have a PS2 or a Vita, you can find it pretty much everywhere right now. You can get it on the Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox X and S, and of course PC. So basically, if you can't find a way to play this game, you're not looking hard enough. They made it extremely accessible. You should be able to find it. I played this on my Steam Deck, the original LCD version. It is a verified game on Steam, and it ran perfectly fine for me. I had no issues whatsoever, but then again, it's not a very intensive game, so it didn't strain my system at all. And you should be able to get about 1.5 to 2 hours per charge for your Steam Deck if that's the way you're playing. If you're wanting to pick this game up, the standard price is about $28 Canadian, and the highest discount that I was able to find was about 35% off, which puts it about just over $18. Convert that as you will. And there are 5 difficulty settings. I chose normal because I don't really like a challenge, to be perfectly honest. And normal is your level 3 out of 5 difficulty. So it looks like the different difficulty settings change the amount of damage that you give and take, the amount of money and experience that you take in as well. I would say normal is fine. It's a good balance of being challenging while still having you be relatively successful. I'd imagine that at the higher difficulties, it really just means that you're going to have to do a bit more grinding, so you're visiting the dungeons over and over again to build up your character's levels. And as far as the size goes, you're looking at just over 10 gigs to be able to install this game. Alright, like I said earlier, this is a pretty beloved game, so critical reception is pretty high. Metacritic has this between mid-80s to low 90s. And if you're looking on Steam, it's over 97% approval with over 57,000 reviews. So, a lot of people really like this game. As far as the rating goes, ESRB has this rated as an M. So it's not quite Mortal Kombat in the early 1990s level of concern, but I would say it's not appropriate for younger gamers. So to give you an idea, my oldest kid is almost 13 and I would not let her play this game. If it was me, I would probably wait until about 16 or so. There's a lot of mature content in here that I would not want them to be exposed to unnecessarily. So as far as the rating goes, you're going to be encountering some alcohol usage. A lot of that is basically just drunken conversation as opposed to actively watching them drink. There's animated blood because, of course. So there is language. It's not like they're going to be dropping F-bombs or anything like that, but there is some bad language going on in this. So if you're sensitive to that, please consider that. Partial nudity, that is not a significant concern at all as far as I'm concerned. Just male toplessness type of thing. And sexual themes. There's quite a bit of horny stuff going on in this game. And if there's anything that I would prevent my child from wanting to see too much of, it'd probably be that. But that's just me. Kind of depends on the type of parent you are. And last but not least, we have violence. Of course, you're going to have violence in a game like this, so you can expect that. How Long to Beat has this game at about 68 hours for the main game. For me, it took about 67 and a half hours, but that was only to get to one of the bad endings. Basically, things cut off really quickly at that point, and you just race to the end of the game. If you want to go after the good ending, for me, took about 15 to 20 or so hours to add on to that. So you're looking about, I would say, about 85 to 90 hours total. So consider that when you're playing a game for over 80 hours, you could be playing another 6 to 8 different games in that time frame. So this is a serious bit of dedication to play a game like this. If you like it, you'll love it, but just know that you could be blasting through a whole bunch of other games in that time. So if you know anything about the Persona games and that entire series, I'm sure you understand that those games are all long. They all seem to take forever. So to give you an idea, Persona 5 is clocking in at about 100 hours. Persona 3 Portable looks like about 65 hours or so. Persona 3 Reload just came out, so it's probably running quite long as well. Basically, any game of the Persona series is going to be a bit of dedication to play all the way through. So to give you a little bit of context as far as how long these games are, I just wanted to compare it to some other games in my catalog. I only have one other game is in quotes, that is about the same amount of time as playing this game, and that's the Phoenix Wright trilogy of games. Took me just over 80 hours to play those. I played them 3 games in a row. I shouldn't have, but I did. Unfortunately, you don't really have that luxury with this game. It is a role-playing game, so keep that in mind, that if you start this game, you're going to want to play it all the way through. I'm sure we've all had that issue where you start a game and you find out that you set it down for a week, you come back later and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. 80 hours, keep that in mind again, that you don't want to have to give up any of that time to try to relearn everything. So it's one of those games that I find that if you get it started, you're going to want to continue it all the way to the end and maintain that dedication to finish the game. So a bunch of other games that I have that are over 50 hours, I say a bunch, but out of my entire catalog of about 200 games on Steam, the games that hit over 50 hours, we got Witcher 3, Dragon Age, both games, Monster Hunter World, Red Dead Redemption 2, Pathfinder. And that's it. So 50 hours is quite a long game as it is, and this blows them out of the water. So now that I've discussed a bit about the game itself, we're going to get into the gameplay, and I will do my best not to show or talk about any spoilers. I will be discussing some gameplay, some of the mechanics and cutscenes as well, but I will do my best not to show anything too important. So just consider that this is your warning. So as the story goes, you're the hero, and you move to the small town of Inaba with your uncle and cousin. As you arrive, strange things start to happen. 2 people mysteriously die. You learn about this thing called the Midnight Channel and how it's related to this mysterious fog that comes into town. And from what you can gather with you and the people that are helping you, somebody must be sending these victims into televisions. And in this television world is where you experience the various dungeons, the shadows, and the bosses and things of that nature. So Persona 4 is a classic turn-based role-playing game. It's quite the departure from your old school Super Nintendo role-playing games. There's no adventuring, there's no real exploration or anything like that. Everything kind of happens in this small, secluded area that you revisit over and over again. The most important part of this game is the mystery and the efforts that you and your team go to try to solve this mystery. It feels almost like the gameplay is secondary in essence, so it's not so much about the actual battling itself, it's about trying to solve this crime. But talking about the battle system, I think it feels pretty nice. It's nothing groundbreaking, nothing too significant, but I think it feels pretty comfortable. All the battles take place in dungeons, and you go from floor to floor, moving up or in one case down into the basements to reach the final boss floor. As you go along, you can see shadows creeping along the ground, and you engage them by swinging your sword at them. Sometimes you could get player advantage, and sometimes they will get the enemy advantage on you. Kind of depends on how you're able to engage those. Once you engage those shadows in the dungeon, then you switch to a standard turn-based role-playing game. As far as comparison, I would say it's kind of like Chrono Trigger in the sense that you could see the enemies in the main world, and then once you engage them, you enter the battle from there. And within the fights, you could have a physical attack, or you could use a skill. Your skill could be offensive, so it could attack the enemies, or you could use it to heal your party, give you buffs, and things of that nature. You could also switch personas, which changes out your skill set, and it changes out your vulnerabilities as well. So with one persona, you might be weak to ice. With another persona, you might be strong against ice. So that might be something worth considering if you're trying to optimize your battle strategy. So as you crawl through the dungeons, you're going to pick up lots of items, and those items can be used at the armorer. He will buy them from you, and then from there, he'll be able to create new armor and weapons. And I think that's a really interesting system because it keeps you at the appropriate level of having the proper weapons and armor to the dungeons that you're fighting in. So you can't be too overpowered, you shouldn't be too underpowered. You're going to get the items for the dungeons to make the appropriate weapons and armor for where you're at. I don't know if that quite makes sense, but it's an interesting balancing system. Speaking of items, you are going to get so many items. There are so many items in this game, you are not going to use the vast majority of them. You're going to be holding on to them until you're done, and you won't know what most of them do. And there are a whole bunch of items that do the same thing as other items, and you're just going to hold on to them. So it's a bit much. I don't know if in the higher difficulties it makes more sense to use items, but in the normal difficulty, I just found that I was collecting them and not using a whole bunch of them. That being said, I did use a few during the very end game of the good ending specifically. I find that the items used to recover your skill points are more valuable, especially the very last fight, so you probably want to hold on to those. As far as the battling system itself, one of the things I really liked as well is that your party members attack immediately, so you don't have to worry about long times between attacks. As soon as you're done with yours, the next person is already in the middle of theirs. After that is done, you're into the next one. So by the time your turn comes around again, only a few seconds have passed realistically. So it feels like things are really moving and you don't have to wait forever while everybody else is doing their thing. Alright, so really quick about the dungeons themselves. There are several of them and you will be going through them one by one. You'll probably be revisiting most of them. And like I said earlier, you're going to be going from floor to floor. You'll be starting at the bottom. You're going up around 10-ish floors, kind of depending on which one you're in. And they all those floors look the same. It's really kind of boring, to be perfectly honest. They have the same rigid structure as far as how they're developed. So you have straight halls, you have rooms that connect to them, you have the same types of turns in those halls. You're going to have various doors that you could open, and then you'll reach a set of stairs and go to the next floor. The only thing that's really different is that the different dungeons themselves have different visuals, but they are designed the same way. So hallways are going to be straight in the same ways, they're going to turn off in the same ways. It's just they look differently stylistically depending on the type of dungeon you're in. So as you climb the floors, enemies are going to get progressively harder. And then on the final floor, you're going to reach the boss. And the boss always seems to be way harder than all the other enemies that you fought up to that point. Like, it might be extremely challenging to face some of these bosses, even though you're able to survive any previous fight before. It seems kind of strange. I think that's where the grind comes in a little bit. You may have to revisit other floors, fight some more enemies, level up a little bit more just to be able to beat the boss, even though you were able to get to the boss relatively easy. And after the occasional fight, you're going to come across a thing called shuffle time. It's a chance for you to possibly get buffs. You might get some penalties as well. Basically, a few cards are shuffled up, and they could give you various things like extra experience points, extra gold. You could level up personas and things like that, but they could also decrease your experience, decrease the amount of gold you get, things of that nature. So if you strategize well, you can get some really good benefits out of it, but there's a little bit of planning involved in that. So that's the basic battle system. But realistically, that's not the biggest part of the game. For most of the game, you're going to be doing lots of running around and talking to people. The story is the driving force of this game. So while some people may really love the story and want to be involved with all the conversations, it might be a turnoff for some people. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest issues for some people that aren't quite sure if they're interested in a game like this. There's a lot of talking. And while a lot of it is focused on trying to solve the mystery of the crimes happening in this small little town, anytime that you're not trying to solve the mystery, it seems like everybody wants your attention. So one of your goals is trying to develop various social skills. You're trying to get closer to a number of other people. And by developing those social skills, you can make your personas more powerful by performing fusions. So let's talk about personas real quick here. A persona is a manifestation of a mental barrier that's holding a person back. On the surface, that doesn't make much sense. In the game, it doesn't make much more sense. But essentially, you get a persona, so this character, that sticks around with you, provides you with different skills, and is able to provide you with various strengths and occasional weaknesses. So, you're able to fuse various personas to create different ones, which will give you different skill sets, and you're able to get different strengths and weaknesses to various elements. So like I said earlier, there's shuffle time after the occasional battle, and an occasional card you can get are persona cards. So there's a lot of different personas you can pick up. Once you pick one up, then you hold on to that, you gain those skills, and you could use those personas within the fusions. If you have developed your social skills from earlier, then those social skills can be used on a very particular set of personas. If you fuse them, you can get potential bonuses by gaining extra levels from what that persona would be. So for example, if you're going to end up with a level 23 persona after a fusion, maybe your bonuses will be another 2 levels added on top of that. Something like that. It makes sense. You probably just have to play the game for it to make more sense. So that being said, I found it to be probably the most creative part of the game. Not necessarily the most fun, like I like the battling and all that, but I think it was kind of fun to sit and see which fusions I can make, what skills I can gain out of it, how powerful I can make any personas out of fusions I can make. And I think that it's probably one of the greatest strengths of this game. Now, unfortunately, to get to the most fun part of this, you still have to spend some time developing those social skills, and those felt tedious. They felt like they took a long time to develop, and the benefit that you got out of it wasn't necessarily great. Essentially, it was just going around and talking to people and listening to their stories. So it was just a bunch of conversation, a lot of dialogue, a lot of listening, and it wasn't necessarily the most fun part of it, at least for me. Some people are really going to love that, to be kind of immersed in this world where real life is happening and you're part of that real life. But I think that really slowed down a lot of the potential of the game, and it felt like it was really dragging on when it didn't need to. So this game takes place over the course of a year, and you're going to go day by day. The days are organized by different times of day, so you start off in the morning, and you may have various different types. So you may have after school as part of your day, or you may have lunchtime as part of your day, or things like that. It's kind of all over the place. You may get one day, you may not get it the next day, type of thing. So you may get a lunchtime, and then your next one may not be until 2 weeks after. So knowing exactly how your day is going to be laid out felt really random and inconsistent. So in the world, you're going to be able to visit other places in town, usually with a fixed camera angle. So things like the shopping district or the floodplain, you're going to have the one camera angle that follows you, and you could visit shops, talk to some people, things like that. And while you could do some cool stuff in those places, that'll be where you could upgrade your weapons and armor and things like that. You kind of have to be careful what you do. So things like going to the Chinese restaurant and eating a meal, that'll end your day. So unfortunately, you won't always know what those things will do, but eating a meal, that ends your day. If you go to the shrine and pick up a fortune, that'll end your day. So once you know that, you'll be able to plan your days a little bit more. But if you're trying to do a little bit of exploring, you just kind of have to know what are some of those things. At the end of the day, you're going to end up at Dojima's house, which is your uncle. And from there, you could do one of a few things. You could only choose one generally. So things like you can study or read, do a job, stuff like that. And then that'll end your evening. So also there's a lot of side quests, very standard fare for a role-playing game. As far as I can tell though, they all seem to be fairly pointless. I could be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but realistically, I didn't care for pretty much any of them. If I completed them, that's fantastic. I got some items out of it. Some items that I'll never use because, like I said before, you're going to get a whole bunch of items and they're just going to sit in your inventory. If I recall correctly, sometimes you get a weapon or something like that, usually way underpowered because you're way past that point. So I'm not exactly sure why those were added. My guess is just some extra content, especially if you're trying to go for some completionist route. So if you're looking to 100% it or something like that, this gives you a little bit more to do. But I just want to make sure to let you know that I'm not complaining completely about this game. There are some really great things about it. One of the things I really liked were the characters. I felt really engaged with them. I felt like they kind of felt like real people. It felt really nice listening to their conversations, seeing how they interacted with you, and I really loved the Japanese voice acting. So I switched the audio to the Japanese voices. I tend to prefer that. Maybe it's just my history of watching anime. I prefer the Japanese voices with subtitles, so that's what I went with here. And I found all the voices to be really good. They did a fantastic job.
でも、ユキコのこと好きなのは嘘じゃないから。
バカ、そんなの分かってるっつの。おい、里中。
平気、ちょっと疲れただけ。
平気じゃねえだろ、どう見ても。それに多分お前、俺たちと同じ力使えるようになってるはずだ。
And I also thought that the dialogue was really good. It felt natural, felt real, and I think they did an amazing job overall. Now, I think playing this game, it made me feel like if the question was posed, what if real life was kind of like a role-playing game? And in this setting, being in Japan, based on high school, it felt like it could have been a real thing. Like if this was real life and all of a sudden you're thrown into a situation where you're essentially playing a role-playing game. I think it's kind of a cool concept and I think it was done fairly well. Alright, and that was most of it. I do have a few final thoughts as I wrap this up here. Ultimately, I think the biggest problem with this game is going to be the length of it. Like I said, 68 hours just for the bad ending. You're looking around 85 hours for the good ending. And for me, after around 40 hours or so, my brain really started to check out. Now, as I went along a little bit further, I started to enjoy it more. And I think it was more because it was more focused on battling. But then I started going after the good ending after I did the first ending. And I felt it exhausting again. It just seemed to drag on, and there were some parts that just took forever to listen to what they had to say, and I just wanted to wander around a bit more. I wanted more control of my own character. And I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the game. Like, I thought it was a good game. It just didn't always appeal to me. Like, there are parts that I really liked. It was just some parts that felt a bit exhausting to play. That being said, if you're the type of person that likes RPGs or engrossing stories or long games or anime or great music, this game has some great music, or, fascinating characters, I think any of those and probably a whole bunch more, I would recommend this game. This would be a game I think that suits a lot of people. It's just understand that it's not a masterpiece, at least not in my eyes. It does have a few flaws, kind of depending on where you stand. So if you have a couple of months to dedicate to a game, this is a pretty good one. I'm not sure how much you'd gain from replaying it though. I'm sure it wouldn't be a terrible game to replay. It's just that, maybe you'll be pursuing different social links and you'll go after those side quests a bit more, but really otherwise, I don't see much replay value. But I haven't done it, so I can't say for sure. And ultimately, I don't think this will be a game that I will play again. It just didn't quite tickle me like I would like it to. Alright, last little bit here. I think this game would be great for a remake. It would give them a chance to clean up some of those blocky brushes and textures, especially in the dungeons. They could give more life to it as opposed to really formulaic style of layout for the floors in each of the dungeons. They could lean into their strength a bit as well, because you're going to be telling a lot of stories. But even that being said, it felt like some of those stories, when it came to building your social skills, felt kind of shallow and a bit short. It feels strange to say that, but I think they could work on that a little bit more as well. And I think that basically any type of remake for this game would be a really good seller. They wouldn't have to do much, to be perfectly honest. One thing to note is that once you complete the Void dungeon, which is about halfway through the game, you may get the achievement of Game Over. Just note that it's specifically for beating that dungeon. It doesn't have anything to do with beating the game. If you ever need a hint, go to the bathroom. That's one thing that I just kind of randomly ran into, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. So you're going to be in the bathroom, you're going to do some thinking, and you might get a clue as far as what you need to do next. As far as the AI, I think it's kind of wonky at times. There are periods where all of your teammates just guard, and they don't do anything at all. So that means all the damage either has to come from you, or you're going to be escaping that fight because you can't do anything. As I mentioned before, it is worth repeating. This music is great. I loved almost all the music in it. And anytime that a game has great music, you're generally going to get my attention. And of course, one of my bigger gripes is the amount of dialogue in this game. There are periods of time where you're not going to have control of your character for hours on end. It could be like 2 hours at a time. The biggest problem that I have with that is that sometimes you may not be able to save the game for 45 minutes or whatever the case is. And that could be really challenging, especially if you're trying to escape the game. Maybe you just ran out of time to play today, but it's still going. You're still following this dialogue and everybody's still talking, and you're not going to be able to gain control of your character for a while. It could be very frustrating. So that's one of my biggest gripes about this game, and it happens multiple times throughout the game. Alright, so that all being said, I think I should be able to score this now. So I think I'm going to score this game a 9 out of 15. So I'm going to give it 60%. So it's not terrible. It's far from great. It's not going to be nearly as high as all the ratings put it. I'm putting it quite a bit lower. I think it could be a better experience overall. And maybe if they remade the game, I would feel differently about it. Maybe. We'll have to see how that goes. So there it is. I'm going to put it at about 60%. Alright, and if you want a little bit of extra content here before I wrap it up, here's a short snippet of the final boss fight. Now, please note that this is not actually the final boss fight of the good ending. This was of just the bad ending. So if you want to spend a little bit extra time, there are much more intense fights coming up if you follow the good ending. I won't tell you how to do that. That'll be something you'd have to look up. Alright, so that being said, I covered a lot, but I didn't cover everything. So was I fair? Was I wrong? Please leave those comments below. I would love to see those comments, and I'm sure everybody else would like to know what I might have missed. So before we go, I'd like to thank everybody that is on my Patreon. Just kidding. I still don't have a Patreon page, but I do have an empty Discord server. So if you'd like to chat with me, if you'd like to talk about Persona, if you'd like to talk about any other games, please let me know. I do have Persona 3 Portable waiting, so that'll be something I will play in the future. Maybe I'll get my hands on Persona 5 as well, but it might be kind of far down the road. We'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for listening. Without you guys, I'm just a weirdo talking into a microphone. So thank you for hanging out with me, listening to me rant about Persona 4 Golden. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.